Welcome to the Hickory podcast. I am Dr. Ann Vertovec with my co-hosts, Sharon Anderson Morris and Wilfred Audley. Hickory stands for Hope, Health, and Healing in concert with ourselves and the earth. Our conversations and our interviews are meant to inspire hope, health, and healing. Welcome to the Hickory podcast. Hickory stands for Hope, Health, and Healing in concert with ourselves and the earth. And we have the perfect guest today to discuss Hickory-related topics, which is Josh Borthwick from New Zealand. He is the CEO of Sustainable Coastlines and gave us a wonderful, hopeful interview about the huge problem of plastic and other litter in our oceans and beaches. All his work reminded me of a Jacques Cousteau quote, which is, "We only protect what we love. We only love what we understand. And we only understand what we are taught." Josh is a great teacher on the importance of this issue of plastics and single-use trash that's inundating our oceans and beaches.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic. He's a real inspiration to me, a person that is also starting in his local area and just moving bigger and bigger and bigger, making that change on a small scale and then seeing that ripple effect get larger and larger and larger. And I think that that's inspiring to us all. When we're trying to help the environment, it's these small changes that add up over time. And that's inspiring to everyone. And it's it's really great to see, and it's really great to hear because we have a lot going on, and it's just great to see the change occurring, even in small scales.
Yeah, and I think if we could help him get recognized on a global basis, he could partner with different cities, different countries, and work as a world to make change. I think he's got it down.
Well, the Litter Intelligence is a citizen scientist program that's online, and anyone can access and use and add data. So, I mean, like you said, they already have the groundwork done to make this an international, truly global project. So I hope you
Absolutely.
enjoy the podcast.
Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hickory podcast. Today, I am excited to talk to our guest, Josh Borthwick. He is the CEO of Sustainable Coastlines, which is a New Zealand charity that brings people together to reduce plastic pollution and other litter on the beaches. Josh is passionate about sustainability and the role people and technology can have in regenerating our planet. He has spent 26 years in technology businesses and startups, running teams of specialists. For example, he led the commercial launch of the Forever Project, which provided a platform for businesses to invest in positive impact and tell their stories about sustainability. And he also led the Accidental Eco Warriors campaign about Trade Me's positive impact on diverting waste from landfill through a secondhand marketplace. And now, of course, we're going to hear about Sustainable Coastlines. But he's been on the water and around the water all his life in New Zealand, or Aotearoa, as we call it. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. How did you become interested in sustainability in the environment?
I think being I was lucky enough to grow up in the Bay of Islands, and my dad was a really keen sailor, so spent a lot of time out in some pretty beautiful stretches of water around some islands there. And so at an early age, I had a real appreciation for the environment, the natural environment. from even before we had sort of recycling and a little bit more infrastructure here, I remember bailing things into bins to go and take them to sort of recycling centres. You had sort of centralised places you could do that sort of stuff. So I've always been really keen to try and keep waste out of the environment in particular. And I've travelled a bit around the world in places like the Annapurna Circuit and seeing firsthand, you know, some of the waste issues there with countries who potentially have less infrastructure or really struggle to deal with the influx of waste as well. So yeah, I guess through experience and seeing a lot of this stuff, it's made me really passionate about reducing our footprint and really making a difference in that space.
Excellent. Well, I think you're at the perfect company for that right now.
Yeah.
You know, both you personally and Sustainable Coastlines combine goals of sustainability, optimism, and grassroots activism with advanced technology. I mean, it's a great combination. And I know that Sustainable Coastlines' goal is to see 60% less litter on the coastlines of New Zealand by 2030. And the way you achieve it is through empowering communities to take action for their local beaches through coastal cleanup events, educational programs, public awareness campaigns, and litter data collection. Can you tell us more about Sustainable Coastlines?
Yeah. So we're about 14 years old, and our founders started the organization after seeing some of the waste coming up on the islands in the Galapagos. They were doing some diving and surfing out there and gathered a bunch of local rangers and workers and other tourists that are around and lifted close to 7 tons of rubbish off the islands there. It was pretty amazing, and found ways to transport that, you know, using sand barges and things to try and get it to a refuse centre. And so he took that philosophy. This is a guy called Sam Judd, one of our founders. He took that philosophy back to New Zealand, and that's when he met up with one of our other founders, Camden Howard, and they took that sort of mentality out to Aotea, Great Barrier Island in New Zealand. And it had a real sort of, I guess, pirate startup vibe to the organization at that point. So they got huge amount of volunteers, you know, hundreds of volunteers on these barges and boats over to Great Barrier Island, and they lifted about 3 tons worth of rubbish off those islands as well. And so it became really clear that this problem isn't just happening, you know, overseas or in other countries, it's happening right here on our doorstep. And that really created a movement to start educating people about the problem, particularly schools and children in schools, about the issues, but also getting other community groups together to run these big events and get people along and see the problem firsthand and get some of that waste off the beach and out of the environment. And since then, we've really developed into more science-led programs as well. So one of the things that I think we discovered early on is, you know, if we just keep turning up and cleaning up, it's not going to solve the problem. We really need to start seeing policy change and consumption practices and business practices change as well. So about 5 years ago, we developed a program called Litter Intelligence. And you would have had experience with that, Anne, when you were volunteering with us. But essentially, we're teaching communities to be citizen scientists and take an audit of a patch of beach in their area and upload that data into a web-based data app that we've got. And so we start to get a picture of the rubbish on the coastlines around the country, and it's what some of the worst offending items are. And typically that's plastic, and a lot of plastic food-related goods, so plastic wrappers and bottle tops and things like that. So we've started developing New Zealand's only database at a national level that gives you that picture of litter in the environment. And what we're starting to see is policymakers use that data for policy change, and businesses become more aware of circular practices that they need to engage with in order to reduce some of those plastics on the beach. And people thinking about what they consume, you know, like what's going into their kids' lunch boxes, and that's showing up. They see it firsthand showing up on the beach as well. So we're really hoping to make behavior improvements all along that route, and get more and more people involved to making this change.
Yeah, the numbers are amazing. I think 7 million liters of litter that you guys have documented, 1.7 million liters, something like that. And you've had 250,000 educational presentation attendees for this. So it is really interesting. And we did a beach cleanup when I volunteered there, and then did the data collection. And it doesn't take as long as you think, even though it's like hundreds of pieces, and it is very interesting what you find. And I love when you do it with a group, you're kind of like it's like a team building event almost.
Yeah.
Everyone really gets into it together. It was a wonderful experience. And you mentioned about insight for the government and stuff. And my understanding was it October 2022 that New Zealand government actually passed a ban on some single-use plastic. I think partly based on some of your surveys. Was it the drink stirrers and cotton buds, which we were finding there? Ours are mostly cardboard by us, but that's, something to think about, that the ones that are made of plastic kept showing up. But you were involved, Sustainable Coastlines was involved with that legislation, correct?
Yeah. So the government used that citizen science data to identify which problem plastics to tackle first. And so they've recently banned straws as well, plastic straws. And there's a whole lot more, another 20 odd categories of plastics that will either be phased out or work through to find alternative solutions. So it's really encouraging to see that data coming to use. And I think as citizen scientists, our volunteers, that's what they want to see. They want to see the data that they're collecting create this change. And what it also means is that when government implements these policies, they can see the traction that they're having, and see over time if it's really having the impact that they intended. So we should see things like plastic straws reduce more and more over the next few years as we're collecting this data. And in fact, we'd already seen plastic straws reductions just by volunteer changes that you were seeing in businesses. So lots of bars and restaurants stopped using plastic straws. And we actually had a citizen science group, or a group of volunteers, many years ago on the Wellington waterfront, who ran some surveys and ran some cleanups, and found a whole bunch of plastic straws in those cleanups, and traced it back to the restaurants and the bars that were in that area, and actually went and showed them the data. And they all collectively decided to stop using plastic straws after seeing that information, and went to cardboard straws and alternatives. And one of the restaurants that was in that group was Wagamama. And so they had hundreds of thousands of stores internationally that they rolled the sort of plastic-free straws out into as well. So it really goes to show what an impact, just that kind of meaningful piece of data can have in the right hands with the right people.
Yeah, what a wonderful ripple effect. But
Yeah.
and what I like about that is you're not going to the bar saying you're bad, you're using plastic straws. You're just saying, hey, this is the data on where these plastic straws are ending up and the harm, and just letting them decide. That's a wonderful approach, because I do remember reading somewhere that, you don't try to tell people what to do. You try to show them the beaches and then let them come to the conclusions themselves. It's more impactful that way.
Yeah, we really try and meet people where they're at, and practice, I guess, our philosophy around sustainability and environmentalism is love, not loss. So we really believe that when people love the places that they're connected to, they're much more likely to make a change to save those places and to protect those places. So we really try and keep all of our advocacy positive, and work with as many different people as we can to see these changes come through.
Yeah, Jacques Cousteau has a great quote about that, basically, that you protect what you know, what you love. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
that's
absolutely.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions before I switch gears?
Yes. Josh, so I'm honored to meet you.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm the CEO of firefilms.org, so I'm always looking for good documentaries to share with our worldwide membership.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
And I think that there's like nothing better than a really well done documentary to educate and to transform, things that are going on with our planet right now. Have you ever heard of the documentary called Midway?
Midway? No, I haven't.
Please do. So Midway is beautifully done. It's directed by Chris Jordan, and it's about Midway Island and the albatross that are eating the plastic.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a whole plastic island, basically.
Yeah.
And they're feeding their babies, the albatross are feeding the babies plastic, and they're dying. So, most documentaries aren't uplifting that I work on, to try to get messages out to, but I think it's a really critical documentary for anybody to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's a company called Agilyx, AgilYX. And that company has large boats that collect the plastic from the different vortexes that we have in the oceans and turn it back into crude and give it back into oil companies. So it's kind of like satisfying everybody. And so the oil companies are saying, look, we're really happy to be part of, of this effort to turn the plastic in our oceans back into crude. At the same time, it's bringing awareness of how devastating the vortexes are to our environment. So those are just two things I wanted to see if you had any connection with, and maybe that would help somehow. And people are always talking about wanting to get rid of plastic. Do you have the ability to partner with partner cities to work together to gather funds to try to alleviate this horrible problem?
Yeah. So I think on with respect to the albatross, one of the sort of key bits of education we've done with kids in schools is documenting and highlighting some of the issues that we found with albatross here in Aotearoa as well. So we found 500 ml water bottle inside a albatross's stomach before, because they're scoop feeders, so they can scoop up a whole bottle like that. So we're really aware of that issue of marine life, birds, and in particular ingesting plastic. In fact, if you're a bird, Aotearoa, New Zealand is one of the most dangerous places for you to be, and so many of the world's birds migrate through here. So that's very top of mind for us. I think as far as collecting plastic in the gyres and those vortexes in the ocean, anything we can do to remove the problem is and take that plastic out of the environment is really useful. But of course, what we really want to see is I guess a move away from our reliance on plastic. We may never completely remove plastic as a source and as a product, but I think there's lots we can do to use alternatives, to find alternative methods to producing, reusing, and thinking about the life after its useful use. And for us, single-use plastics is probably the worst offender. Those things that just protect an item for a few days and then end up in the landfill or worse yet, out in the environment. So we're really trying to encourage people to reuse as much as possible, buy in bulk, and eliminate that single-use plastic as much as possible.
I'd be happy to introduce you to the director of the film is called Midway.
Yeah, thanks.
On my side of things, I think what you just said was very, like, you and my mom were just talking to perfectly encapsulate kind of my mentality as well, growing up to try to, effect some change on the world is along that lines of starting small. of, you know, starting to the baseline and then letting that be a ripple effect. You know, your story about how you went to approach this one store, this one location, and then it enacted change on a more global scale. And that's something that I think that we've been kind of letting our audience know, because people that aren't necessarily in this realm or this world, you can kind of get overwhelmed by the idea of trying to enact such great global change. But at the end of the day, it starts small. You know, for example, with someone like yourself, Josh, who you know grew up in that world, grew up in the environment, and saw it firsthand, and that allowed you to essentially work on your area and then grow bigger and bigger, bigger from there. I don't know if you had any touch points on that and how you see that, but in my world, in renewable energy, trying to eliminate carbon emissions. You know, I just at one solar panel, one battery at a time. And, you know, in my local area, and then over time, you know, enact that global change is something that I think, you know, it makes it digestible and it makes it actionable for us to, you know, deliver the change that we want to see in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really work hard to encourage many people to do small things rather than one or two people to do big things, you know. So
Right.
having one or two people live completely waste free or manage their waste in a handful each year is amazing and inspiring, but just doesn't get us the scale that we need to really make an impact. So I think that that idea of small changes and ripples and lots of people trying to impact what's going on is really important.
Absolutely. And do you have any advice for someone who maybe isn't in our world, isn't like, you know, actively working for it or wants to, but on like a daily basis, something small that they can change that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think volunteering is a really good start. So there's so many groups all around the world doing this kind of work, doing beach cleanups, working on science around what they're finding in their environment. And so I think that's a really good step, is to get volunteering, and you know, for everyone to have a little bit of volunteering in their month, their week, their years. The other thing is I think everyone can make some changes in their personal consumption, you know. So just renewable water bottles is seems so obvious, but still, you know, people there you go, yeah, still people forget about that sort of thing. So trying to ensure that you've got a good stock of renewable bottles, that you've got reusable cups. If you turn up somewhere at a cafe and you don't have a reusable cup, sit down for 5 minutes and enjoy the coffee rather than taking it with you and creating that waste.
Right.
So I think people really starting to think about their own consumption and make changes there does make a big impact.
Absolutely. Welcome back, Mom.
I was going to say, speaking of volunteering, so I spent a fabulous 2 weeks in Auckland, and I volunteered for Sustainable Coastlines through International Volunteer Headquarters. And I mean, it was fabulous. And I really thought I was going to be like the old person there, but you have volunteers from all walks of life coming and joining you for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, etc. I mean, it was really inspiring, and it was so fun to meet people from all walks of life and share stories and become friends over the time. That was a great experience. The other thing I loved was your flagship education center, which I did want you to mention for a minute, because it is New Zealand's most sustainable building. It was made from old box cars, and it has compostable toilets, which were wonderful as far as I was concerned. It was so easy. And you have recycled purified water. I don't know if there's anything more you can tell us about the building, but it is really an inspiration to sustainable living.
Yeah, that was the intention when it was designed and built, was to sort of showcase what could be done in the middle of the city, in the middle of a car park, actually,
Right.
with reused materials. And when we originally set it up, we were actually going for the Living Building Challenge, which has a number of petals that you need to achieve to get full living building status. And we got sort of think about halfway through those petals, and then discovered that there were elements of the sort of the challenge that we couldn't actually get because of the way it had been built. So, for instance, we had volunteers just putting hundreds of hours into the building in a neighboring car park, chopping wood and doing all the fittings and pieces, and we hadn't tracked all of their hours. And one of the kind of the methods of the Living Building Challenge is you need to be able to ensure that people are investing equitable hours and not working overtime and not doing some of those things. We hadn't tracked some of that stuff. The other parts of it around air quality are quite tricky with a building in the middle of a city, filtering that out. So what we've ended up with is a really cool showcase of the sorts of things that can be done with reusable materials and a bit of imagination and thinking, and it's a really good event space for anyone working in the sector wanting to showcase something in sustainability. So it gets used a lot as an event space and by the community too, as well as our office and our headquarters.
Yeah, it's awesome. And on your wall, you have a turtle. Well, you have the turtle, I think, separately, but you show, unfortunately, all the contents of that turtle's stomach that's mostly plastic. And this poor turtle perished. And that's similar to what Sharon, I think, was talking about with the albatross at Midway and the whales. There's whales, washing up shore that their whole stomachs are full of plastic. And, it is overwhelming. I think they say there's 170 trillion pieces of plastic in our oceans, and it's doubling every 6 years. And, it's depressing, right? And the predictions, like by 2050, there may be more plastic than in the ocean than fish. So I'm just wondering, with these sort of negative numbers out there, how do you inspire others to keep working on this huge problem and not give up?
Yeah, I think one of our values is something we call the high five effect. So anytime we're engaging with people or at an event or running a workshop, we want people to leave feeling uplifted. And so we always give people, we talk through some of these really hard facts, what we're finding in the oceans and these problems that you just mentioned, but we also give people really relevant things that they can do to make a difference. And I think that's a really important way of staying positive about this, and the impact that you can have is just thinking about all those little changes and those ripples that make these big leaps. And as we know, nothing changes overnight. So we're always talking multi-generational change here when we're thinking about it. And even if we, worst case scenario, we don't get to the sort of the ultimate goal we want, or we don't get to where we need to be, I think there's a lot to be said for living in a way that makes us want to be good ancestors and think more long-term about our impact on the planet. And it's good for us, it's good for our soul too. So doing this stuff not only helps achieve what we want to achieve long-term for the environment, but it's actually really good for us too. Like you were saying earlier, when you're out there volunteering with other people, you get all these other health benefits from being out in the outdoors, by the ocean, with other people. There's a lot of well-being improvements that happen by that sort of volunteering too. So just by doing this work, we're making improvements for ourselves and the environment as well. Very
true. I'm going to jump to Hickory, because Hickory stands for Hope, Health, and Healing, in concert with ourselves and the earth. And I think you've already explained how you give hope to those for the earth. I don't know if you have any other ways that you stay hopeful about the earth, or any other positive stories that you want to share regarding how your work is helping bringing hopefulness for the earth.
Yeah, I think for me personally, getting into nature, there's so many just wonderful, amazing benefits of being in nature, and there's still so much to appreciate, in our natural world. So I think that's super inspirational for me and keeps me going. And I think that's what we try and bring to everyone in our volunteering as well. We're always at a beach, in nature, at a location somewhere doing this work. And I think that's what keeps us going, like that inspiration is really important.
Yes. I think this is my last question, because I really love your beautiful country, which I obviously visited. And unfortunately, I could see the impact of climate change. I was there during Cyclone Gabrielle, which was one of your biggest weather events to have hit you in history. And fortunately, Auckland was spared more than some other areas, but clearly there was damage throughout the whole, well, boy, North and South Island, and actually a number of islands, was really devastating. And your country's, relatively small, just over 5 million people, and the two major and 700 smaller islands. So what particular challenges, advantages, or perspectives do you have living on New Zealand and working in planetary health?
Yeah, I think for us, we are at the sort of the end of the world in a lot of ways, and so we've just got our two islands make up New Zealand, and then we have citizenship from many of those other South Pacific islands like Samoa and Tonga and the Solomons and Fiji. So we have a lot of people that live in New Zealand that come from those countries too. So, excuse me, I think what that gives us is a sense of community in the South Pacific, and the sense of connection with those other places. So we're starting to do work in the South Pacific with some of those islands and train local community groups and governments and councils on the litter intelligence program there too. So we hope we can start to increase that data footprint and provide more statistics and information for policy change in those islands as well. But I think what we're really blessed with in this part of the world, and because we have such a small population, is there's still so much nature and density around us, and that's something that I think Kiwis in particular really relish, is the sort of outdoor lifestyle and being connected to nature. And so I think that does give us a unique perspective when we're developing ideas or programs of work to address climate change or to address biodiversity problems. So yeah, I think we're really blessed in that sense. It makes it hard sometimes because the scale that we're talking about is quite small, but often, like we talked about earlier, this ripple effect happens, so we do have a Sustainable Coastlines sister organization in Hawaii who do really great work too, and we keep in touch with them, and we hope to sort of develop our programs further in that part of the world with them as well. So I think there's opportunity for the bits of impact that we have here to carry on out in the greater world.
Yeah, that's incredible. I would think you may have more success with your government also being a smaller company, a smaller country. I don't know if you feel like you have a better impact with governmental decisions than, I think, in the United States. I feel like there's so many special interest groups that block, many endeavors for the environment. And I don't know if you feel that similarly there, or if you feel like that because you're a small country, you are able to get more done on a government level.
Yeah, I think in some ways our access to politicians is maybe greater. They feel like they're in our community, they're around us, and we can connect with them. But I think we still have many of the same issues with lobby groups and I guess inertia and sometimes a lack of bravery, to really make big policy changes, and it's hard in the increments that we work in. We sort of have 3-year political terms, and there's not a lot of time to get things done. So I think that some of those problems still exist, but we're lucky in that we have a fairly democratic country and lots of access to politicians. So I think that helps.
Someone recently said, we talk about climate change as it being bad, but it's actually been wonderful for waking up or making the masses realize the issue, because things are changing so rapidly. And so in a way, the climate response may help, mankind to act quicker is the goal, hopefully. I'm
Yeah.
not sure, but I thought that was an interesting, spin on it, that, we look at this as an opportunity. And hopefully
Yeah.
with technology and people like yourself, come up with answers to some of these big issues, and hopefully get more plastic out of the oceans as you are working on.
Absolutely.
That's all I have. Thank you so much. I don't know if either of you have any follow-up questions.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to jump in, and yeah, I mean, I just reiterate exactly right. Like, that ripple effect is also on the scale of, solidifying New Zealand and then working, to grow from there. It's just a microcosm of kind of even our daily life adjustments of small scale being a ripple effect. Then we even consider New Zealand as that, that ripple effect as well. And I think that's a very powerful statement to understand and to acknowledge. I, for one, would love to have that kind of belief and lifestyle spread throughout the places that I've lived. I live in Australia, and Australia is coming around to it. But I think that it still needs a lot more. Even Australia, who's dramatically impacted as well. Obviously, you guys kind of have this brotherhood relationship, the Kiwis and the Aussies. There's a lot of Kiwis in Australia, and there's a lot of Aussies in New Zealand. How can we help essentially, and this is kind of a rhetorical question, it's not something that I think we can answer here today, but how do we help perpetuate the experience, the knowledge, and the lifestyle that is so beautiful and cohesive with the environment, and how do we bring it to the places that are not as in tune with that? And that's something that I've worked on in Australia. Australia is the highest, renewable energy penetration levels in the world, and I'm trying to essentially take the knowledge from that in Australia as I learn it, and then apply it to American markets in my homeland. That's something that, that course that I want to happen as in your realm as well, is take your knowledge, take your wealth, and take your lifestyle and apply it to for lack of a better word, larger markets or larger emitters of whatever it might be. And how do we do that? I think one of what we're doing here today is an example of it, is to just give you guys a voice, to give the people that are doing it an opportunity to voice their opinion, to voice their experience, and then deliver it to the people as best as possible, and inform them of what's going on. So I just wanted to say thank you, and we're going to continue to try to perpetuate that knowledge and that lifestyle to everyone we can, and thank you for your work. And if there's anything else you want to say to the people out there that you think would be beneficial to some inspiration.
Yeah, thank you. And I better sign off actually and get going. I've got another meeting to get to, but yeah, I just thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about what we do. And I would just say, there's a few really simple things that people can do. Take 3 for the sea. We've got, there's one of our friends in Australia, friend organizations in Australia always talks about that. Take 3 for the sea. So I think anytime you're out and about and you see rubbish on the sidewalk, in the drain, anywhere you are, if you can grab 3 pieces of it, that starts to make a little bit of an impact and get it out of there. And I think reuse as much as possible, refuse single-use plastic as much as possible. Those are 2 sort of fairly simple things that every person can do, but can have a big impact.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh.
Pleasure.
Good
Thank
luck
you.
with what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks. Ka
Good to
kite.
meet you.
You too.
Cheers.